that great humanitarian, has decided to push off the start of the next war, the next phase of this war against Iran, to give them time to figure out what they're doing and get a unified position. So he says, but an examination of what's actually going on the American side shows that there still remains a great deal of confusion. And it's not even clear what the American side is. We just did a show with Professor Marandi out of Iran, and they are, despite the accusations against them, they are quite unified in what they're doing at both at their government level and at their military level. And their message is very clear. They are not going to come back into negotiations until the blockade is lifted, and then we can start talking about the difficult stuff. Until that point, they're saying there's no talking. The American side, on the other hand, is a little more complicated than that. We're going to get into that today, and we have nobody better to try and figure out just what in the heck is going on than Larry Johnson, former CIA analyst, the king at Sonar21.com, and the son of a new American Revolution on Substack, which we go to a lot. Larry, welcome back to the show.
I am amused by your term, complicated. Yeah. That's one way of describing it. How about dumpster fire?
That's also one of the nicer terms you could use. There are others more colorful, shall we say, that are probably more accurate. But I mean, we have what we have.
Yeah, we could use Donald Trump language and then get banned by the FCC.
Yeah, we probably get exactly. Yeah, somehow it's okay there, but man, just I mean, just let me just kind of start off just kind of at the 30,000 foot level. I mean, President Trump was on CNBC, I guess it was yesterday morning, and talking about how, you know what, they've agreed, Iran's agreed to everything. They're going to give us their reprocessed material. They're not going to do any more reprocessing, no more enrichment. And by the way, they've also promised me that they would never again use the Strait of Hormuz. All those things are done. So we'll probably have a deal. But I'm actually planning on resuming the war if they don't agree to it by midnight. So that's what he said in the morning. And then, what happened with the whole change of venue after that. What do you make of that? And we'll just keep it like about a 10-hour period on American policy.
Yeah, nobody's in control. This is like you're sitting in a plane and the plane starts vibrating and shaking, and you look up front to see who's sitting in the pilot's seat, and there's nobody there. I mean, this is genuinely frightening that Trump's mental decline is accelerating. His behavior is becoming more and more erratic. And, you and I have been around long enough to have seen previous presidents that, regardless of their competence, they usually had control over the messaging. In other words, the administration had one message, and so there was not confusion about what was the intent of the United States. But we don't have that here. So as you pointed out, on the one hand, Trump says, "Oh boy, a deal is imminent. The Iran has agreed to everything," and the Iranians say, "No, we haven't." Or they signed they got a ceasefire in place. And while that ceasefire is in place, Scott Bessent comes out and announces new sanctions on Iran, where one of Iran's 10 points in their 10-point paper was lifting sanctions. So instead of lifting sanctions and showing that you're cooperating with Iran, they do the exact opposite. So this kind of schizophrenic policy is, I think at some point it goes beyond the boy that cried wolf. He kept crying wolf, and finally the wolf shows up and nobody pays attention. I think other countries should just stop paying attention and are saying, America's going to probably restart the war. We got to be ready. There is nothing that these countries can do that are going to satisfy Donald Trump. And Trump is not even listening to his own advisors. Based on that New York Times article from last week, where everybody but Pete Hegseth had advised against don't attack Iran. And what did he do? He gave the order, attack Iran. So he's not even thinking. He's not thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead. Wall Street Journal tried to suggest that this was sort of a Roy Cohn, negotiating tactic, that Trump, act like you're insane. It's like Mel Gibson in the opening scene of the first Lethal Weapon movie, where he starts sounding like the Three Stooges and smacking himself in the face and acting crazy. And Trump thinks that if he acts crazy like that, according to the Wall Street Journal, that will force concessions out of Iran, because they'll say, "Oh, don't disturb the crazy man. Let's give him what he wants." Well, that strategy is not working out. It's backfiring. It's having the exact opposite effect. The Iranians are taking him at his word. He's going to try to end our civilization, and we need to prepare accordingly. So, yeah, this is, and right now, I sent Gary the link that according to Channel 12, Israel's been informed that Trump's new deadline to Iran ends on Sunday. So, that's 5 days from now. That's in that 3 to 5 day window. And tell you what,
here's what Fox News is reporting today. The ceasefire extension will last only 3 to 5 days. A White House official confirmed to Fox. So that validates, I guess, whatever with Channel 12. Although, as Gary was showing us all, there's other Israeli media that seems to be showing something different. So I don't even know if that's clear.
Well, and see, there is the confusion. It's the ball of confusion, and so in that circumstance, if you're one of the recipients of this confused messaging, you got to assume the worst. So, okay, they're going to attack on Sunday, and you get prepared for it, and the markets start reacting, and then Taco Trump comes out and says, "Oh, never mind, we're going to have a further extension." Because when you step back and start saying, okay, what are the actual military options? There is no ground force option. No viable ground force option, unless you can explain to me how you're going to get a contingent, say 2,000 troops embedded in place anywhere in Iran. I mean, can't do it. If what are you going to jump them in with parachutes? Okay, that's going to take 22 C-130s. Okay, 20.
Oh man,
yeah, that's because a C-130 only holds 90 paratroopers with combat loads. So do the math. We have a total, I looked it up, we have a total of between 330 and 350 C-130. So essentially, we're talking about having to use almost 10%, really it's 8% of the entire force in order to deploy, and they are slow-moving aircraft, vulnerable to shoot down. So dropping paratroopers in somewhere, that doesn't make sense. You can do a special operations mission where, one plane and one small unit can conduct a raid, but then you got to figure out how the hell you're going to get them out of there. So there is no ground force option. There is no amphibious option, because the straits are now thoroughly mined, and we wouldn't dare put one of those LHDs or LHA. They look like a small aircraft carrier through the strait. It'd be sunk in a heartbeat. So they have to stay offshore, far enough offshore, so they're not in range of the Iranian missiles. So that leaves us with air power, and in air power, we're dropping missiles and JASSMs and Tomahawks that we're running out of, as CNN reported. And CNN is the most reliable news source, according to Donald Trump, because it gave him 100% approval rating among the MAGA crowd. But look, we're running out. And that they are actually, CNN is wrong in saying half of all THAAD interceptors are gone. Wrong. They're gone.
Well, I actually was going to ask you about that, because the next line there says Patriot missiles down nearly 50%.
50%. Yeah.
I think you were telling us you think your math and your calculation showed it was much worse than that. Right?
It's got to be 90% down. I mean, we can't. We know the numbers that have been produced since 2015, and I gave it the upside, the highest side, and unless they're just not shooting the missiles off, which is like, saying, "Hey, I got this beautiful car. I need to go to the store and get some groceries, but I'm going to walk because I don't want to get the car dirty or bother the car." Well, what's the purpose of having the car? And the same thing with Patriot missiles. Oh, we better not shoot at that incoming missile, because then we're going to deplete our force. No, so here's China sitting back watching this proverbial shit show go on, and they're thinking, you know what? We can deplete the U.S. arsenal without having to fire a gun. We'll let Iran do it for us. We'll back Iran. We'll support Iran. We'll make the United States like, Iran is Muhammad Ali with rope-a-dope, and the United States is Joe Frazier, and just going to punch himself out to the point that they literally deplete their Patriot THAAD batteries. They deplete Tomahawks. They deplete JASSMs. And then China's going, we don't really have anything to fear now. The United States has depleted itself, and Russia the same way. I mean, they've got to be sitting there saying, are the Americans really this crazy?
Well, let me show you something here. You talked a little bit about this a second ago with President Trump. Let me just show you here in just the last little bit today. This is some of the things that he's posted. This is 2 hours ago. He posted the last season of his Apprentice ratings numbers from 2004. That's what he's posting about. He's, I don't know, living in some distant time there or something. Then he claims and says that thanks to him, the Iran has decided that they are not going to execute 8 women. Iran says that, what are you talking about? There are no 8 women who are up. So he's claiming victory over something there that at least the Iranian side claims aren't even anything that were on the docket. Then he goes back again and says that because the Virginia voted last night in a very close election to basically do gerrymandering for the Democrats in response to Trump's pro-Republicans in the North Carolina and Texas. But this one has to be fake. So anytime he loses an election, must have been rigged, et cetera. So he's back on that situation again. And let's see if I can get this other one. Earlier today, I think it was right before this. Let me scroll down here a little bit. Morning Glory, will President Trump go full Sherman in the war on Iran? And you find out that he's talking about Sherman in the Civil War, where he marched to the sea and burned everything down. And you're like, what is this stream of consciousness stuff? I mean, it's one thing to say, oh, he's just crazy as a pejorative. But I think we got to really ask, is it a pejorative?
Oh, no, it's real. In the past, you could make the case that, say 10 years ago, when Trump, or would go 8 years ago when he's in his first term, that he could use some bizarre tactics in negotiations, but there was always sort of a filter or a check. He did not use obscene language, vulgar language in public. He may have used it in private. A lot of us do. There's a way to speak in public and a way to speak in private. What happens though is when you lose that, you get actually diminished brain function, and you lose that filter, and all of a sudden you're saying the things that you may have thought privately, but now you're blurting them out loud. He's doing that, and the evidence of this was his reaction first to Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie, both who had supported Trump early on, and then his reaction to Candace Owens, to Tucker Carlson, to Alex Jones, to Riley Gaines, Megyn Kelly, the Pope, because it's a vicious personal attack, calling them stupid, calling them low IQ, not addressing the substance of what they were saying. In particular, in Marjorie Taylor Greene's case, all she was saying was, Mr. President, you promised to divulge all the information on Jeffrey Epstein, not to hide it, not to protect it. And now you're covering it up. And on that, he attacked her as a traitor. And then when she says, hey, my kids are getting, you got to stop this. My kids are getting death threats. And he says, they deserve it. No empathy whatsoever. So those are signs and symptoms. And then this confabulation. I'm sure he believes that 8 women, that Iran has, suddenly pardoned 8 women, or, that was going to execute 8. It's completely made up, but he believes it in his mind. So that's the thing. You can't even tell reality from fakery.
And obviously that's incredibly dangerous when you got to try to figure out who's going to be calling war and peace issues. And apparently we just have this, Gary showed me, we got some breaking news from President Pezeshkian says the Islamic Republic of Iran has always welcomed and continues to welcome dialogue and agreement. Bad faith, siege, and threats are the main obstacles to genuine negotiation. The world is witnessing your hypocritical, empty talk and the contradiction between your claims and your actions. So if anybody is thinking in Trump world or Trump himself that, these so-called crazy man threats that are going to cause the other side to capitulate are literally having the opposite effect. It is strengthening their resolve to stand firm. And now here's the latest one from Pezeshkian.
Well, in fact, we're seeing, I'll call it parallel policy. The United States is using the same tactics and techniques against Russia that they are against Iran, just slightly different themes. And let me give you a specific example. Within the last 2 or 3 days, we've been getting the message that, oh my God, the war with Ukraine it's a stalemate, and the Russian economy is collapsing. Okay, that's the messaging being put out. Now, it's not true. In fact, the Russian economy is doing pretty damn well with the higher price of oil. Then we get yesterday we saw with Trump's tweet that, oh, there's these incredible internal divisions in Iran, and until they sort those out, there won't be any negotiations. Whereas, and you just saw the message from Pezeshkian, he's saying what the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps is saying. There's no significant fracturing of inside Iran. So you got this wishful thinking propaganda that is being put out, I believe, by the CIA. They're driving sort of the messaging on that. Trump believes it. So he believes the lies that are being fed to him by his own intelligence organization, not able to draw the distinction between an information operation and what the genuine intelligence says. But the policies are being based upon false premises. And again, with Scott Bessent. Now, Scott Bessent reportedly doesn't have prefrontal lobal dementia, but for God's sake, he keeps insisting that, oh, we've got epic turmoil, whatever they're calling the current economic war on Iran, and that it's going to break Iran's back, that it's going to collapse their currency, that they can't hang on much longer. And it's
But remember, that's the same guy that said he was going to out jujitsu the Iranians by taking sanctions off of them so that they could sell more oil at a higher price. So that's the brilliant guy we have there. Take that for with what it's worth.
Yeah, no, he thinks he's some sort of strategic thinker, and the guy's a clown. So Iran. Is Iran's economy having suffering somewhat? Yeah, but they've got options. It's called the Caspian Sea. They're open to the border with Russia. They've got Turkmenistan, that entire border's open. They got Pakistan, that border's open. They don't have to worry about something arriving by ship. It can all go over railroad or by road, conventional road with trucks. So, but the United States keeps selling itself on this nonsense that, oh, we got them right where we want them. And we're the ones that keep shooting ourselves. We're the ones with limited options. And we keep imagining that we've got this, I forget which general was arguing yesterday. Oh, yeah, we just got to put like 10,000 troops into Iran. How the hell are you going to get them there? I mean, you remember what it was like at the assembly areas in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia.
Very clearly.
You weren't, you were maybe dodging a few Scud missiles, but the Scud missiles were not that effective at all. And the accuracy front that sucked. Well, today, tell me where you would put if you say, well, we got to have our assembly area outside the range of an Iranian ballistic missile. Okay, that means you're 2,000 miles away.
As a matter of fact, Larry, before the ceasefire went into effect, one of the last targets hit on the Saudi coast was at a port called Al Jubail, and that got my radar because I remember they were hitting, I think, some energy infrastructure there, and I remember that's where we debarked. That's where our ro-ro ships came off with our tanks and our armored personnel carriers and everything else, and that's where we got everything off. And I'm like, man, if we were trying to do that today, I mean, we'd come under a hail of missile fire that's accurate. So we couldn't do Desert Storm in the event of today. But you mentioned something about it a second ago about a general. Now, it's one thing if we're talking about President Trump, who clearly has reduced cognitive capacity and is deteriorating, I think, in an increasing pace. So you can say that's problematic. So then you might say, okay, well, those around the president who aren't suffering from that, they're probably going to be talking to him and trying to say, hey, sir, we got to do some things differently. One would think. Instead, here is General Keith Kellogg doing the opposite.
I think we need to finish it. And I think President Trump is really good about having an embargo, a blockade, to cut their economic lifeline. But I would even go a little bit further. I'm one of those that says, take some land. That doesn't mean you march on Tehran, but you can take Karg Island, which is 90% of their export of their oil. You can take the Strait Islands as well, like Larak, which is their command and control island, or Geisha. You have the capacity to do that, and then you control it.
Really, then you control it. I mean, Larry, this is not just some pundit. This is not just some talking head. This is a guy who was the national security advisor for the vice president in the first Trump and was the commander of the 82nd Airborne Division, is making these statements that it's just like my jaw drops. As if I was a second lieutenant, I would go, wait, something doesn't sound right about that. Yeah. What do you say?
Again, how's he going to get the troops there, General? You know, we don't have a Star Trek teletransporter. So you're either going to drop them from the sky, or you're going to fly them in on a fixed-wing aircraft, land, and let them run off the back, or you're going to try an amphibious landing. Well, you know, the air defense systems in Iran are still intact. And just ask the pilot of that F-15 that got shot down near Isfahan, or the pilot of the A-10 that got shot down. I mean, the U.S. has lost something like 48 aircraft. So that was not just from shrapnel or from bird strikes. So, and then do the math. What size force is going to be required to take an island that I think the population on Karg is like 10 to 15,000. So, you know, are you going to need 2,000 troops to try to control 10,000 people? That might be a bit difficult. But as we, talked about earlier, 2,000 troops, you just do the math. You get 90 paratroopers on board a C-130. So you're up to about 22, 23 of those that have to go in. Yeah, it just, as you point out, it would be one thing for Donald Trump to be saying stupid stuff like this, because he doesn't really know better and he hasn't taken time to educate himself. But for God's sake, Keith Kellogg should know better. All I can assume is he spent too much time at altitude with no oxygen.
Yeah, but that gets to the point, though, that if these are the guys that have the ear of the president, and you can't accuse them of having frontal lobe problems. Right. I mean, that's just what they're thinking. You mentioned Bessent, you add him to that list. But the question is going to be, where is this going to go? And it's not just there. It's also in the media. Here's earlier today on Fox News with Jennifer Griffin and Harris Faulkner having a conversation.
President Trump's 3 to 5 day ceasefire deadline coincides with the arrival in the region of a third aircraft carrier strike group, the USS Bush, in the coming days. Harris.
Because you reported and reminded everybody that Iran never actually agreed to the ceasefire. So that's interesting because they accused the United States blockade in the Strait of Hormuz of being a violation of the ceasefire, but they expect it to be honored.
Well, the real question, Harris, is who is negotiating on behalf of Iran? Who is in charge there? And we really still are not clear at this point. The IRGC and the IRGC Navy does one thing, and their Speaker of Parliament says another thing to Pakistan. So it's very difficult to know what is actually happening and what is happening with the leadership of Iran right now.
You know what? Let's just look into that. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just said she keeps repeating that lie that, there's this big division. The IRGC is doing one thing, and Pezeshkian or the Ghalibaf is doing another, the Speaker of the Parliament. No, they're not. Just read the damn messages that come out from them. They're not contradictory at all.
And you know what? I even wanted to go a step further. who cares? What does it matter if they have? I mean, I think you mentioned that Wall Street Journal and a couple of other New York Times have been assessing, what's been going on behind the scenes at various decision points in the Trump administration, and it always talks about. I mean, I think you even said it. Trump and Hegseth were on one side, and the Vice President Vance and some others were on another. We have division inside. That's normal. That's the way it always worked. And yet, there's this message that means something, that, oh my God, they're not unified. What does that have to do with the balance of power? What does it have to do with whether you can or can't take Cargill Island, or can't open up the Strait of Hormuz by force? Why are we camping on that?
Yeah. Well, and again, what is accomplished by taking Cargill Island? So the notion is, oh, well, then we'll cut off Iran's ability to export oil. No, we won't. They got alternatives to that. So that's one where they're working on either bad intelligence or they're not listening to the intelligence analysis. I mean, either's quite possible. But it gets back to, what is the strategic objective? And it is the goal to ensure that Iran does not build a nuclear weapon? Is that really our goal? And I argue, no, it's not. That we use the nuclear threat as an excuse to justify. We want to destroy the Islamic Republic, and it's predicated on this mythology that Iran has been killing Americans for 46, 47 years, and unrelenting. And we didn't do anything to them. They just attacked us out of the blue. And it's like, what? And so, in fact, without naming, I'll tell you offline who I was having an exchange with, but a very prominent American politician, now retired, but who served in a very, very senior place within the Congress. And this gentleman was putting out information that claimed that the attack on the the U.S. embassies in East Africa in 1998, that those were carried out by Iran. And I said, no, that was Al Qaeda. Or the attack on Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia, that was the work of Iran. And I said, nope. In fact, one of my good buddies, we were in the career trainee program together. He was the chief of base at Khobar Towers. It was blown up by Al Qaeda. And what was interesting is John Brennan was the chief of station in Riyadh. And my friend, he was the chief of base there, where in Jeddah. And Brennan restricted any CIA collection on Saudis that were involved with terrorism. Let me repeat that. John Brennan prohibited my friend and the other CIA officers that were in country from developing any information about Saudi links to Al Qaeda and terrorism. And so, but my point is, these lies and information keep getting put out there. And so it's not entirely, I guess it's easy to blame Trump for the mental lapses. But listen, when you're also being fed a steady diet of horse manure, well, it's not your fault that you start neighing, and he's not being well served by his national security advisors. He needs to tell some of these people just to go away, leave him alone. He needs the truth, but he's not getting it.
And so then, if we're talking about how we're going to make a decision where we're going to go now, whether it's 3 to 5 days, we're going to go back to conflict, whether we're going to try something else negotiating, whether we're going to try to just outlast Iran. I mean, where are we going to go from here? And even before I get that to you, there's one more soundbite I want to show you here from another so-called expert on Fox News this morning that kind of was talking about this whole issue of the who's in charge thing. But listen to his suggestions.
I do think there's a real factional division, and that the RGC dominated leadership right now believes that time is on their side. They think they can absorb the costs better than we can absorb the costs. And at this point, they feel if they hold out, they will have to give up less in these negotiations. So I think at this point, It's a test of us. The right answer to that test is to preserve the blockade. The blockade is an answer to what they're doing in terms of trying to exert their leverage over the Strait of Hormuz. Let's not underestimate the impact of a leadership dominated by those who are really ideological and who think that any concession at this point actually detracts from that ideology and reduces the following they have among those who are also the most ideologically committed.
I wasn't clear on that last part. He was talking about Benjamin Netanyahu or somebody in Iran because, you know, that ideological thing. But let's look at the premise of what he's suggesting there. He's suggesting that we can outlast Iran. I think that even if you gave poor marks to the Iranian side and their stamina, which is not good based on history, but let's just say that you did and say that they could only make it 3 or 4 months, and you know a blockade then would bring them to their knees. Let's say that you believe that was true. Yeah. We can't last 3 or 4 months with the strait being closed here, and yet that seems to be what people are talking. Here's just one example. This is from today. Here comes the food inflation. Cost for food companies jumped 7.9% year over year in March. And this is basically just from the higher fuel costs. We're still waiting for the impact of higher fertilizers, et cetera. Ergo, every month this thing goes on, those numbers keep going up because the price of fuel keeps going up, and the amount of petroleum products that are made, that are used to in the feedstocks, are also going down. How can we have a course of action, Larry, that doesn't have anything other than like a week or so as a time frame?
Yeah. Well, first, when I saw Dennis, I was laughing. I kicked his ass. Well, okay. Well, so back when my son was
like George Foreman kind of version?
It was indirect. It was through baseball teams. So he and a guy named Neil Kerwin, who was the president of American University, they had this little league team, the boys aged 10 to 12. And so my son and my nephew, I became the manager of the team. And so in our third year, the first year we played, we were the Bad News Bears. We lost every game. The third year, we won the championship and we beat their team. Now, their team had been together since, these kids had been together since they were 6 years old. They were now 12. They've been together for 6 years. So that's right. I defeated Dennis Ross. And you know what? Dennis Ross is as good a political analyst as he was a manager of a baseball team, okay? So what he said is just nonsense. What has been exposed in the course of this war is the limits of U.S. military power. It's one thing to sit and say, we're the most powerful military in the world. How many hypersonic missiles do we have? Well, that'd be none. Iran has some, and China has some, and Russia certainly has some, but we have none. Oh, okay. So the great power. We're dependent upon aircraft carriers, which really were built for the 20th century warfare, not for 21st century warfare, because they can't avoid the missiles, the hypersonic missiles. And the hypersonic have the advantage; they can be steered and maneuvered, or the cruise missiles that are now available. All of this was, I call them. These are the modern day kamikaze aircraft with no pilots. The United States got the preview at the end of World War II of what the future was going to be like for aircraft carriers. If you've got an aircraft of some sort, it can carry an explosive and it can, hit you without having to kill a pilot, you got problems. And no amount of air defense is going to protect those aircraft. So, across the board, we've exposed the weakness of the U.S., including our production capability. We're running out. We are severely depleting, draining stocks of entire classes of weapons, and pretending that this war with Iran is going to be over in a week or two. It's not. And we can keep feeding ourselves these lies that, there's great division. There's great division in Iran. They lack popularity. People that say that forget that during the American Revolution in 1776, what percentage of American colonists supported that war at the time? 40%. Okay? 40 to 45%. There's another 20% that didn't care one way or the other, and the rest were solidly on Britain's side. So I'm just using that as an illustration that we set the standard up. Oh, if we can just get a majority of the people with us, they won't stand. No, we've already proved that even a strong, committed minority can rule a country. But that's not the case with Iran. Iran is actually more united now than it has ever been in its 46, 47-year history, because they were attacked in a cowardly fashion from the outside that murdered children. And that, Americans who still have a memory of 9/11 remember how outraged we were by what we viewed as a cowardly, unprovoked attack. The anger that brought Americans together. Iran's experiencing the same damn thing. And yet we foolishly pretend, they don't have emotions like us.
I thought it was really telling last night in Tehran, before it was announced that President Trump had extended the ceasefire. There was basically a parade in Tehran with missile launchers out there and people with flags and stuff all draped around it, knowing that satellite technology would be able to see that, and it was a risk of it being attacked, and the people didn't care. They're out there, in support of their side.
Yeah.
So that didn't think exactly they were protesting to overthrow the regime.
Yeah, they weren't cheering to say, good, the ceasefire is extended. No, they weren't cheering for that. They were cheering initially because they thought the ceasefire was over.
Yeah,
yeah.
That was before.
And they're willing to continue fighting. We've entered new territory now, and we're still trying to use the old math that applied, for 20th century and not the 21st century. And again, we fail to understand Iran. We've convinced ourselves that the Iranians killed 45,000 protesters. The actual Iranian number is down around 3,500, and not all of those were protesters. A lot of those were people that were shot and killed by elements that were armed by the CIA, as Trump admitted it.
Trump himself admitted, yeah.
Yeah. So, Iran has faced, they faced subversion, they faced an attack, and they're reacting as any normal country would in those circumstances. In the United States, we labor under this delusion because we've actually never really been attacked here in the United States in any significant way. And I include 9/11 on that. That was, less than 4,000 dead. Well, that's a tragedy, but that wasn't, we weren't seeing massive attacks across the country at all.
Yeah. Well, so where do we go from here? Because we've seen that the first 40 days of this war burned up all this stuff. And even if you just say, okay, not that one, sorry, this one, even if you accepted these numbers at face value and said that we've used up 45% of this, half that, 30% of this, out of 40 days. So if we then say, okay, if we're going to restart it like General Kellogg wants to do, and they're going to go after whatever target set, and then what are you going to do in another 40 days when now then you've nearly burned through all of that? You're having to use now PAC-2s and older versions of stuff which are even less capable, other missiles that we have a lot of, but then they're going to require you to get closer to the target. It's going to make you more susceptible, and it's going to have less power. And if the first 40 days didn't compel them, what are we going to do in the second 40 days? And now then you're talking about another 2 months by the time this would be over, of all those prices starting to go up even more, and the shortages accelerate and deepen on that. What is the point of where can we go? Because this stuff is out there in the open, and who is surrounding President Trump, and with his state of mind, where do you think this goes?
Yeah, it's going to hinge largely, I think, on the stock market and the commodities market. They continue to indulge in this fantastical thinking that the war is actually almost over, that Trump is in command, that there's no way that Iran can win. And so let's break out. You've got the military and the economic dimension. On the military side, the United States is going to launch attacks, and this time, highly likely that there are going to be more American aircraft shot down inside Iran, and that there will then be American military personnel held as POWs. And that alone is going to ramp up dramatically pressure on Trump because It's like a reprise of the Iranian hostage crisis that seized America from the fall of 1979 until January 21st of 1981, when all the American hostages were released. So you've got that dynamic. You're going to see the dynamic of the U.S. attacks not having the dramatic effect that Trump is promising, that it's not going to break Iran, that it's going to redouble Iran's commitment to fighting back. And while the United States like to pretend that it's going to be delivering great blows to Iran, Iran is going to be hitting America and Israel. And Israel is not in a position to take the kind of pounding that it will get. Iran has vowed that it's going to do more and do it on a far more extensive level. So then Trump will be faced with the reality that he doesn't have an escalate. Can he go to a nuke? Well, that brings in too many other issues with the Russians, the Chinese, the Pakistanis, the North Koreans. That can get completely out of control. So he's going to be frustrated on the military side. And meanwhile, the economic, in fact, as you noted, this inflation is going to continue to shoot up, and it's going to accelerate. Just yesterday, Kazakhstan announced it's cutting off its oil flow to Europe, Germany in particular. Well, that's a significant portion of German fuel. They've got, they got 9 days until that goes away. On May 8 days, it goes away on May 1st. So what are they going to do? It's not like there's an abundance of oil out there, because 20% of the world's oil is now gone, or it's bottled up in the Persian Gulf. So that whole economic cascade, it's going to be like the start of a tsunami. Initially at the tsunami, the water draws back. Oh, the beach is open. Look, everything's calm. And then all of a sudden, here comes the wave, and people can't outrun it. And that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen.
And let's take a look at what is happening right there. This is 2 hours ago. The parliament member Galibaf, who's also their chief negotiator, he just posted this: a complete ceasefire only makes sense if it is not violated by the maritime blockade and the hostage taking of the world's economy, and if the Zionist warmongering across all fronts is halted. Reopening the Strait of Hormuz is impossible with such a flagrant breach of ceasefire. They did not achieve their goals through military aggression, nor will they through bullying. The only way forward is to recognize the rights of the Iranian nation. Now, Larry, they can make those kinds of claims right now. They can do math. They can see that report by CNN. Not that they needed it. They got intelligence that they can get it on their own. But they realize the dearth of capability that we have, because ultimately it doesn't make any difference how many aircraft carriers, ships, destroyers, F-35s, F-22s, all that stuff. It doesn't make any difference how many of those you have. It matters how many weapons you have. It matters how many missiles. And when you don't have missiles for them, they're useless. They're paperweights. Yeah. And we're running short on that to fight a war. Iran, on the other hand, has the strait in their hand. And there's nothing you can do to force it out of it. And they don't like what's going on, but they can go on for months like this. There's every reason to think that they can. We can't. So at some point, doesn't the president or those around him have to recognize that if we keep going down this fictitious road here, we're literally going to drive into the rocks?
It ultimately hinged, I believe, on John Ratcliffe, lesser extent Tulsi. Sadly, Tulsi's been, she's been a non-entity throughout this, and they're excluding her from meetings. But the intelligence, Ratcliffe is the one who can finally come in with Kane. And I was told yesterday by a mutual friend of ours who's connected into that whole atmosphere that Kane and Ratcliffe are becoming increasingly concerned about Trump and his behavior, and how is narrowing the options for the United States and putting the United States at risk. So those two could actually come in and finally try to make an issue of it that would stop Trump from doing some of these things that could really worsen the situation for the United States, and then make it clear that, hey, And some of this has started coming out. There's a report out today about the CIA is preparing a report saying, look, Iran is actually stronger militarily than we thought. That was, and they've got more weapons than we thought, and they've been able to restock some of the missiles that they fired. They're producing, they're manufacturing them during the last 2 weeks. Their underground missile cities are being quite efficient at that. So, that's a sign that they're finally putting the intelligence in front of the Congress. That's not gonna pull any punches, and we'll actually say this is how bad it is, and that despite all of Trump's fanciful claims, if those two make that argument in private with Trump, he may ultimately have to concede. But again, the problem is his erratic behavior. He could start bowling up and yelling at them that he's undermining. And you saw this, he came out with that crazy message citing how long the wars went on for World War I and World War II. Well, what he forgot to mention in there is that 20-year war in Afghanistan. God, who was president for 4 of those years? Let's see. Let me think. Oh, yeah, that'd be Donald Trump. So why didn't he end that war? Now, reportedly, he tried and was betrayed.
Yeah, but he didn't succeed.
Yeah, but he didn't succeed.
He was the president. He didn't have to. It wasn't like he couldn't do it. He chose not to. And I know that because Doug McGregor had the order in his hand to bring it to an end on his watch, and Trump allowed himself to be talked out of it. But I digress.
No, but that's the point. So Trump has no accountability, no responsibility. Everybody else is being unfair to him. He's the victim. And meanwhile, he is leading America. I think, the analogy is you're on the Titanic and you can see the iceberg and you ain't slowing down. So we're going to run full tilt into it.
So let me ask you in the last few minutes we got here, given all of this that you talked about on both the Iranian side and the American side, the good, the bad, the ugly, the limitations, the capabilities, all that stuff, where we are right now, given especially what I just showed you, what the Iranians' negotiating position is in their entry level to even get into a sustained ceasefire, what will America have to do? What is the best case scenario right now? What kind of terms for us to get this war off the table?
Trump hinted at it when he talked about how the JCPOA, he's going to do something better than the JCPOA. And the fact is, if they try to make it, let's make this all about getting a firm commitment from Iran that they're never going to build a nuclear weapon, and we're going to have the inspection procedures in place. If he can get that deal. Now, that said, and I posted at Sonar 21 last night just a recap of the original JCPOA from 2015. It took 18 months to negotiate that. And I mean, it got into nitty gritty details about which nuclear plants and sites in Iran could operate, what kind of inspections were going to be done, what kind of enrichment level that Iran would be allowed to do, what sanctions, a very complicated agreement. Trump could get one of those. And the biggest problem with the JCPOA, if you want to say it was a problem, was it was capped at 10 years. It was not like a permanent agreement. So the big change where Trump could claim victory is say, hey, I've got a permanent agreement. We'll reactivate JCPOA with some adjustments that Iran's going to demand all of the sanctions off now. We're not going to wait. We're not going to be phased in. They're off now. We'll agree to this permanent. Then he could claim a victory. I prevented Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. That'd be his way to walk away from victory. But that's going to leave Israel hanging, and there's the problem. Well,
hang on before you even get to the Israel. The Iranians said, "No way, shape, or hell are we walking away without control of the Strait." So how's he going to square that one?
Well, he just said, well, they suffered damage, so that yes, the Strait will be the way that they recover the money that for the damage they incurred. Yeah, he can,
He can just say that.
Yeah, he can lie about. He's lied about everything else. Why not lie about that?
Certainly in his toolkit there, he's got that tactic.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. So to the Israeli side, though.
well, and the Israeli side though, they're going to be furious, but they've been slowly committing suicide this week, or not slowly, rapidly. That image, so the Zionist hatred of Christians has been well established. There are ample YouTube videos showing these ultra Orthodox Jews spitting on Christians coming out of churches, children spitting on Christians. Then you had the Easter, Palm Sunday and Easter blockade of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where Israel closed that down, and that elicited protests. But finally, the straw that broke the proverbial camel's back was the video of that Israeli soldier using a sledgehammer on a statue symbolizing the crucifixion of Jesus. I called it Jew on Jew violence because, Jesus was a Jew, and here's this modern day Jew, clubbing Jesus. Well, you know what?
Not good imagery.
That set off some alarm bells finally across the Christian world, even some who had been ardent defenders of Israel. And man, did Bibi Netanyahu jump to, oh no, we love Christians. Oh, really? Go look at let's look. Islam says that Jesus is a holy prophet. What do you guys say? Jesus was a nobody. The Muslims say that the Mary, the mother of Jesus, she's a holy woman. What do you guys say? Oh, your Talmud says she's a whore. Oh, so maybe there's something to this visceral hatred of Christians. And man, Netanyahu is, we're putting those two guys, they're on leave for 30 days. Oh, there's punishment. Let me see if I get this straight. You're going to take me off the front line where I'm getting shot at and possibly blown up, and I get to go home for 30 days for vacation? Oh, yes, please.
Punish me.
The pain. I mean, come on.
Okay, so there's a lot of headwinds. Bottom line, to your best case scenario. Now, what is your most likely case scenario? What do you think Trump is going to do in the near term? Let's just say in the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, he will authorize this. They got the plan. The plan's been in place for a month at least. This massive bombing campaign. They're going after infrastructure, power centers, but Iran also gets a vote as soon as the United States launches that, because Iran's being very careful not to take any kind of military action where they would be blamed as breaking the ceasefire. They're doing that out of respect to Pakistan and out of respect to China.
And by the way, Professor Morandi just told me right before your show here that Iran would not break the ceasefire. They would not be the one to do it.
Yeah. So they're and even though the way the West is portraying that the capture of some of they boarded now 2 ships, but reportedly 30 others have gotten through the blockade. So I think Iran's standpoint is they'll protest that. They'll put that in the memory box to be dealt with later, but they're not going to react militarily to that. But when this attack starts, they're going to fire off, and there's at least one military base in an Air Force base in United Arab Emirates, and then Ali Jabal, the port, which is also a large free trade zone. You got Al Udeid in Qatar. You've got 2 different bases in Saudi Arabia. You got 5 in Kuwait. All of those are going to be hit again and again and again, and Israel's going to be hit. And they'll take out the power center in Israel so that they too they'll suffer the same fate as Iran is supposed to suffer. The difference is Iran's got a much more decentralized system. Israel's is much more centralized. And a point that I know that Professor Morandi has raised, and I'd raised it too, is when you're hitting mid-May in Qatar, it's hot as a pizza oven.
Yeah.
I mean, I was there on May 20th of 2006, and I couldn't believe how hot it was. And then you get the sandstorms coming in. That's always fun. So when if the power centers are out, if there's no real electricity available, those cities in Saudi Arabia and Qatar and United Arab Emirates, they're going to have to abandon them.
And and I've got some personal experience of that. When during Desert Storm, we arrived on station, and I want to say this was the 5th of December, 1990. And then, of course, you had the 100-Day War, whatever. And then it took us time to get everything in order to get rolled back out through the same ports, et cetera. We left in around the middle of April. And there was actually time when there was frost on some of our tanks in the February, March period of time there. But man, by the time we were leaving there, it was an oven, and that's in April.
Yeah. No, I mean, so the weather becomes a factor, and that also actually affects aircraft maintenance and the performance, both of helicopters and fixed wing. I mean, the things, again, if you're doing planning, you need to take that into account. And I think some of our planning sucks. we haven't really thought that through fully, but the Iranians have it. And Iran's not going to be affected the same as Professor Morandi will tell you. He can sit in his home and look out through the window and see the mountains in the background that are snow covered. So, you're not dealing with 60 degrees Celsius or 120 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. It is, and that's, I will say, though, funny story. I was there at Al Udeid and came out of the dining facility, and they actually had a Burger King food truck there. And I thought, oh man, I'd like a Burger King. And looked over, there was the facility, the recreational facility. And next to it, they'd built a miniature golf course. Now this was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 120 degrees. And there were 4 young soldiers out there playing mini golf. And I said, man, those are some hard lads.
Yeah. Well, listen, man, it's not a very positive looking thing, because, man, if we do what you suggest, and if Trump eventually, whether it's Sunday or sometime before or even after that, goes back to any version of military, if he listens to General Keith Kellogg, all we're going to be doing is just moving the potential date for this resolution off into the distant future.
Correct.
And all of those problems financially, economically, oil, gas, the fertilizers, all that is just going to continue compounding up. And I don't know how we get out. I don't know how he gets out of this one.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's if he was surrounded by people trying to talk him out of it, it'd be one thing. But when you've got Jack Keane calling him up and
Lindsey Graham,
Kellogg Cornflake doing it, and Lindsey Graham, and they're all,
Mark Levin apparently is another.
Oh yeah,
he's definitely saying, yes, we should definitely go and finish the job off like Patton did in the Third Army. He said that a couple of days ago too. So those are all the guys that have presidents here. But
yeah, and
he needs to have you. See if we can get you in there, and maybe we can get him some sense talked into him.
He wouldn't like what I have to say.
Yeah, but I would.
Yeah, that's true.
So would all the soldiers out at the sea. And in fact, I know we're just about out of time. Just real briefly, because I know you have some context. What do our troops at the front lines of this, when they see all of this back and forth and weird stuff coming out of Washington, D.C., what is their morale like?
Yeah, actually, let me just read a message from one of my friends who is embedded, and I was asking him. I said, that Iran, I said, Iran's certainly not going to entertain any talks until this blockade is removed and sanctions are lifted. And he wrote me back. He said, me and the boys don't really give a shit. This thing wasn't popular to begin with, and it's turning south real fast. Everyone is pissed. Morale is in the shitter. Seems like no one in the box office is in charge or has any idea what the fuck is going on. So I'd say morale is pretty good.
I mean, let's just cut to the chase. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine how it could be any different. I mean, I'll just tell you, I know we're about at the end of the time here. One of the things that during our Desert Storm time, especially, we knew we had everybody's support. That we had UNSC authorization. The Congress had weighed in on it. We knew we had the backing of the American people. We had, I had our troops on our left and our right. We believed in what we were doing. We thought you crossed a border and you put a threat to the globe's oil supply. We can argue whether or not that was always true or not, but that's what we believed. And we had that backing, and that was all true. And the morale was just through the roof. I can only imagine what it's like right now when they're saying, no one attacked any of us. We did the attacking. No one's behind us. We see stuff falling apart. And what in the hell do I have coming out of the White House? I can't even imagine fighting under those conditions.
Well, in fact, I shared that with a young friend of mine who just, he graduated West Point, 5 years ago, and then he just finished his commitment to the Army, and he's out now. But he's still in touch with buddies who are still in. And, the guy I was talking to is an officer, or a fairly senior officer, but he's dealing with lower level people. And he said it's the same thing. He's hearing the same thing from his buddies. So, yeah, it's anecdotal evidence, but we're getting it from a couple of different sources. And I don't hear everybody saying, oh, man, they think this is great. We're doing wonderful. This couldn't be better. No, they don't see it. They don't see an exit. They see, we're trapped in a corner, and you got to say, how do we get out?
And we have to hope President Trump gets some sanity. That's not a good thing to base it on, but that's where we are.
Not holding my breath.
Well, thanks for coming on, Larry. As always, we're very grateful for your no kidding truth on all this stuff. And as a reminder that you're at sonar21.com, you're always putting out great information there. So people don't have to wait until you're here the next time, because there's too many things happening and too fast for them to miss it. So go to sonar21.com and you will be up to date on the reality as much as anyone. Thanks very much. And we'll see everybody on the next Daniel Davis Deep Dive. I don't try to talk you into buying gold or tell you how to run your stock portfolio, but there is a way you can help us. Subscribe, hit that like button, and share this with somebody you love.